attention, BART riders.
Hey, San Francisco, I'm Ben Kaplan, and this is the podcast where we define who we are and who we want to be.
We are diverse.
We are innovative.
We are inclusive.
We are change makers.
Problem solvers.
Activists.
Leaders.
Citizens.
We are open-minded.
Optimistic.
There's hope for a better tomorrow. And you got to give them hope.
This is the podcast that's more than a podcast.
San Francisco, they are the world champions.
We are San Francisco. Well, welcome to We Are San Francisco. I'm chatting with Chris Larsen. He's the co-founder, now executive chair of Ripple, a leading crypto tech company, but also he's really been involved in the past few years in being a benefactor in a lot of different ways to San Francisco, or we were chatting about it, maybe just getting things unstuck, unblocked, helping things move through. And so, Chris, welcome to the podcast. And how did you get started with this? You've described it as a lot of folks, many of us are guilty, kind of sit back and say, things ought to be better. We ought to change things. Why is it this way? But not a lot of us take action on that. And not a lot of us take action to the extent that you really have over the past few years. So how did that journey come from you, and how did you get so involved with the city? Yeah,
well, again, first for having me here today. I really appreciate it. Well, look, I was born in the city. I was raised outside of the city, but then kind of came back to SF State, where I got my business degree, and then, been pretty much here ever since. I love the city. I think it's the greatest city on the planet. Wouldn't want to live anywhere else. It's got a magic that no other city or place has. I think we all understand that. But it can be frustrating sometimes when we see some of these problems just continuing and seem so solvable, but that don't get solved. So, I've been fortunate. I have resources where I can, and time now to spend thinking about how we might solve some of these things. And they really kind of got involved first through setting up a camera network with the CBDs, the community benefit districts, nonprofit, hyper local nonprofits. There's 18 of them in the city, and I got involved in that because I live in a part of the city which has been unfortunately really targeted with a lot of the smash and grab, problems that we see right around Lombard Street. It's kind of ground zero, or at least it was. And started work, got involved with the district attorney at that time, George Gaston, who introduced me to some folks that have been solving that same problem in Union Square. And I thought, okay, let's bring those same tools and technology, mostly network cameras, and let's try to bring those other parts of the city. And one thing led to another, and now it's kind of getting involved in other areas that we think we can help on.
And I want to get into those areas, and we'll touch upon crime and safety. We'll touch upon small business. We'll touch about kind of police recruiting and morale. So we'll hit those areas. But I'm actually interested in something you said, maybe to start off with, about, what I agree with you on, which is San Francisco is the greatest city in the world. And there's a lot of pride in the city. And there's this unique combination of, a really there's a sense of innovation, there's a sense of inclusiveness, there's a sense of diversity, there's a lot of natural beauty, there's a lot of different groups that come together, whether those are ethnic groups or LGBTQ plus, or all these things come together to make San Francisco unique. So why does it feel like people are down on San Francisco now? I don't know if you feel that, but it's just like so many people that I know, because I've spoken to them in the past, like San Francisco's great, I wouldn't be anywhere else, or are just down on it, or they've moved away, or it's just lost its mojo. And I don't know, I understand the problems being a cause of it, but how do we get that back? First of all, just get back that pride, that confidence, that, I guess mojo is the only word I have for it. How do we get our mojo back?
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the things that motivates me, because I think it's grossly unfair, some of the critiques that you hear, mostly from people that I think don't really know the city, maybe have moved out of the city, they're not up to date. Honestly, if you walk around the city today, sure, there are problems and there's some pockets that look pretty bad, but downtown looks way better. Union Square does. I know there's vacancies, but people are out. If you look at the tourist data, so first of all, I do think it's an unfair characterization. But I think that is born, we're in a hyper political environment. San Francisco kind of represents sort of ground zero for a certain type of politics. So I think we suffer from that.
Sort of a liberal, more progressive, so it becomes a symbol, a symbolic, and that's why you see a story that would otherwise be a local crime story in San Francisco hit national or even international headlines. And when I travel around in other countries, some people ask me like, well, gosh, you live in San Francisco. How's everything? Are you okay over there? Right? It's because they've been seeing the news because of that sort of symbolism. You think that's why that translates and a local crime story would get covered around the world?
Absolutely. I mean, you could show the same 3 blocks and it would look like, the worst place on the planet. And that's obviously not accurate. I don't know if you remember in the, the 89 earthquake, right? I mean, on the, global coverage, you think the entire city burned down and collapsed, right? Because they kept showing the same block in the marina. It's a little bit like that, right? That's the stuff that sells. And look, not to let ourselves off the hook, we shoot ourselves in the foot all the time. Our politics are kind of a mess, right? But I think, look, we still are the place where innovation happens, where not just innovation, where thinking totally outside the box, this is where it happens. And I think it's no surprise, we're now in an AI tech boom, like we've never seen before. It's the talk of the world. And where is it all located? It's all right here, right? If you look at the top 4 citations on AI research, it's OpenAI, it's Meta, it's Google, it's Stanford, it's all right here. That's not a coincidence. It's because this is the place that will let you think the crazy thought, and at the same time attract people from all over the planet that know that they can think the crazy thought and it's not going to be shot down.
And I think that, you adjust to say it's not just innovation, but we mean innovation in a broad sense, right? It doesn't have to just be technological innovation. Certainly it could be, there's a lot of really advanced technology and certainly ChatGPT and has brought a lot of folks to AI, but it's innovation in lots of ways. Like, let's make progress. Let's push things forward. Let's challenge the status quo. And if you are smart, but a little weird, come. If you are, you want to make a difference in your community, but you're a little bit different yourself, come. And it's like that attitude is a real strength if we embrace it.
It's absolutely right. And many of the problems we have are also born from not just compassion, but a belief in kind of the sacred right of the individual. Now, we can go too far on that. And clearly something broke in that kind of compact with homelessness and it's really a number of people that are dying on the streets every single day. So something isn't working there, but it is born. I think generally you could trace back some of the things we're criticized from. It's born from compassion and that, kind of ultra belief in the rights and freedom of the individual more than kind of any place, in America, I think.
And if I was going to describe it, maybe in a sense, I would say, good intentions, very good intentions with unintended consequences, where sometimes we've wanted to push something through. It's a noble cause, but because we've created it in a certain way and there's an impact where like, okay, you're going to say like, oh, it's, to use a common, maybe an example, it's in the news now, like we don't want to do business with companies from states that aren't supportive of certain values. We want to put financial pressure to come over those values. But then the problem is, if others don't come on board, if that impact is limited, then suddenly you have less competitive bids from a limited number of states that impact how efficient or cost effective something might be. So good intention, unintended consequence. And now you kind of have to reverse that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think that kind of thing goes way too far. That's not the inclusive sort of beliefs that I think are the bedrock of the city, right? Even with things we disagree with, that's kind of the whole point of being open and accepting. But I think there is some corrosiveness in the city where that desire to protect the individual at all rights then kind of overrides, hey, but this isn't working, right? And then you get other folks in the city that are afraid to stand up and say, no, we got to move in a different direction because they're afraid of being accused of being like Trump people or something, right? That's what you see in the city. Almost everybody here is like progressive, right? We all believe in what makes San Francisco special, that openness and acceptance. but there is this, this kind of dynamic where if you speak out, in a way that might look moderate or, pragmatic, you can be accused of being insensitive and kind of a right wing and all that kind of stuff. And that's wrong. That's not dialogue. That's built on a power thing to shut people up, right? And that's the thing that we have to reject. And that's the thing that I realized I was probably a part of. We had businesses here, went to school here, but don't get involved in the muck of it because it's just, I just don't want to do that. And that's the thing. I think that's what's changed in me. And I hope and I see that changing in a lot of people now in San Francisco who love it, but know the problems are very fixable and are, they're born of this. We've gone off the rails in our quest for compassion, and it's backfired. And that's the thing we got to stand up to.
And sometimes it's also a question of timing. What I mean by that is that when you're in an emergency, if there's, a fire at your house, you're focused on the fire, right? You want to put out the fire. There might be other things you want to do in the house, right? The house, we probably should, let's make the backyard a little bit, more inviting and nicer. Let's have some opportunities for our neighbors to come over and enjoy it together. But if there's a fire in your house, you got to put out the fire. So just because there's like some focus on that immediate crisis or that immediate need, that doesn't mean that's forever. In fact, it probably shouldn't be, but you've got to do things at the right time because you don't get to do all the other things if you don't put out the fire first.
That's right. We got to take the wheel back, right? For maybe, and then turn it back over, right? But things are going to skid off here. And part of it is that, maybe the city hasn't changed, but the world has changed. And two big things we're facing nationwide, right? Not just in the city, an acute shortage of police officers and a morale problem in the police. That's hurting everybody, right? So that makes your environment that you might have been okay in 20 years ago much more challenging. And then, of course, the fentanyl epidemic, which has killed 100,000 Americans, last year, over 100,000, and up to 3 San Franciscans every day. That's different, right? We're not talking about somebody smoking a joint, walking down the street like you would have talked 30 years ago. You're talking now about people dying and people being sold things.
I actually want to get into the topic of sort of police recruiting, police morale in a little bit of a roundabout way, maybe not normal way, because you've been very involved and recently I think you did some, ads during March Madness, that was kind of trying to get more recruits, but also talking about kind of the pride of being a police officer in San Francisco and the impact you could make. And I saw some of those ads, but I want to get to that by talking about when we talked about kind of this, almost like this branding problem that San Francisco has, just in national headlines. We've talked about people sometimes kind of, it's overblown in certain ways. There's real problems, but it's done. But how does that impact something like police recruiting? Because it's one thing to say like, okay, we get some negative press and, that's unfortunate. That's too bad. We ought to change that, but it's just some negative press, let it roll off your back. It's different when that's broadcast around and you've got to do something like recruit police, and maybe more police are saying, why would I want to do that in San Francisco if this is the situation? This is what I'm going to be put into. It's a really expensive area to live. I'm going to maybe have to live outside the city and commute in, and all of these issues. Does some of that bad PR or sort of bad branding actually have real consequences that prevent us from solving our problems?
Absolutely, for sure. Again, the police shortage is a national problem. But when you think of what that means every single city in the state and in the country is recruiting from the same, limited group of people that want to become police officers, which has been made way harder for all kinds of reasons, recently. But yeah, it does hurt. San Francisco's challenges on the police issue are way tougher than they are in Walnut Creek, for example, because of that very issue. So we've got to work on recruitment, got to work on morale, and we got to turn that around. What's really sad, you talk to police officers who've been in it for 35 years, used to be like the children of police officers became police officers. And that's happening less and less. And I think that's a really sad development.
And when you talk to police officers, do they wish it for their kids? Or they're like, you know what? It isn't worth it.
No, they don't. The ones I've talked, they're sort of happy they're going into technology or something else, right? But that's a real shame. And that's kind of that's a break from the past, right? So how do, and part of that's of course housing, as you mentioned, which can be solved with resources, so we got to solve that. But that's harder for the city, and it's showing up in the numbers, right? That's the thing I'm most alarmed with now, because that's like a crisis and it's heading in the wrong direction. So we've got to turn that around, and that's why we started doing some of the ads, which weren't just recruitment; they're also about morale and showing how much we should be respecting the police for the tough job they have.
On the recruitment issue, I mean, you've co-founded companies and are chairman of a big of Ripple, a big crypto tech company now. From that experience and companies have to recruit, particularly fast growing companies. Is there any lessons we can take for recruiting police officers? Because sometimes, I have my own company, my own marketing agency. And if I'm having trouble recruiting one type of person for a position, I'll be like, okay, well, how can we break up the role? How can we make this role a little bit more attractive? So maybe we don't need police officers for the things that don't require police officers, like responding to crimes. Maybe there's other issues that involve, a mental health understanding, others that involve checking in on people and a sense of compassion, other things, even just administrative. Police officers have to file a lot of reports. Maybe that can be done with other people. So usually if I was having a problem at a company and I was recruiting something, I would sort of say, how can we make the job more attractive? How can we break off other pieces? How can we focus in and make this more specific? Is there room to do that? Do we have to lower the total number of police officers we need to recruit because we're not going to get there otherwise, and kind of focus the job on things that only police officers can do that they would actually want to do?
Yeah, you're raising so many good points there, because it is a complex issue. But let's start off by, if you were a CEO of a company, right, and you had to recruit a bunch of workers, right, you would come up with a plan, and you'd hopefully solve the issue, right? It's not the way it works in San Francisco. The CEO of San Francisco doesn't have the power to do the kind of recruiting that she needs to, right? She has to go to the police commission. And it's the police commission that's largely going to say whether or not you can do the things that you want to as the CEO of a company, or in this case, the city. That's a problem. So part of the police issue is the mayor of San Francisco not having enough power to do her job, Linda Breed. She needs more authority. And then let's hold her accountable. But how can you hold a mayor accountable or a CEO accountable if they don't have the right to do the things that they need to do to lead the city? So that's a problem that comes from the Board of Soups that then appoints the police commission, and so that's part of the issue that we need to change through getting the Board of Supervisors, I think, more aligned with the mayor. That will happen hopefully in the 24 election. We need more tools for the police. And there's another problem there too. We have a lot of nonprofit groups that are blocking tools that would otherwise tremendously help, especially in a police shortage. Things like license plate readers, especially with the smash and grab issue, where most of the smash and grabs, these are professional crews, right? This isn't just random. There's not random homeless people doing most of the damage there. It's professional crews, usually using stolen cars or stolen plates. So having license plate readers that would identify that would be huge. That's continually blocked by EFF, ACLU, which, by the way, only really blocks that in San Francisco. They're not doing that in other cities. We kind of get picked on there. That's a problem. You raise a good point, though, of other things that can help with the shortage. So you're right on, police are asked to do too many things, including dealing with mental health. So getting more mental health resources, but also being a little bit tougher with forcing people to get help. That's a problem in the city. And again, there are certain nonprofits that continually go to court to block the mayor and even the board from doing some of the things to be a little tougher to force people into mental health services. Again, that directly results in the police having to do more work that they hadn't signed up for. I think we can also do some other things with ambassadors, these urban alchemy, for example. It's in the Tenderloin. That's effective. They're not police, but they kind of help with stuff that might lead to issues. And there's another category called police specials. I think that's an area that's being looked into. It's somewhere between ambassadors and police officers to help with the burden of lower priority calls, which right now aren't getting answered. So it's a really complex area with a lot of very doable solutions that we all have to kind of work on together.
You highlighted the part about really the difficulty of our structure with the mayor, supervisors, and then individual commissions, which may retain power. I'm interested in your perspective on this. I mean, is the solution to a lot of problems, not just crime and safety, but a lot of San Francisco's problems, is it going to come from the top down, or could it come from the community up? What I just mean by that is, if you look at if there's enough collective will, and you've brought a lot of individual will to things and rallied people around too, then things that are surprising actually get passed. And I'll give you an example of that. So the Board of Supervisors, right, supported recently overtime pay for police officers. If you would have taken that decision and like maybe moved it back in time without the collective will, what's happened, and put that back 3 or 4 years, no way that probably passes. But there's such a collective will from the community. There's a sense that we have to do it, that, politician, like anyone else, feels pressure, says, I can't oppose this. It gets through. So I just sometimes wonder, like, is it truly like top down? It can be an effective way to go, but do we need as a community to come together in more ways, doing things like you're doing? Maybe people don't have your financial resources, but they can rally people in other ways. They can organize people in other ways. And if we can get that collective will, maybe the top follows.
Yeah, I mean, you're raising a great point. I think it's kind of yes and yes, right? So, I mean, we do elect our leaders, our mayor, our board of soups, to get the job done. But I think a lot of people, they don't realize when they elect the mayor that she doesn't have a lot of power to do some of the critical parts of her job. So then how can you hold her accountable, for example? But you're totally right on, if people get involved, the board of soups and the mayor and these commissions, they do pay attention to that. I think the big question there is, how do you define community, right? So if you define community as the 100 people that show up at a board of supervisors meeting and yell, they get a lot of attention. They even get a lot of stuff passed. It's not really the community. The community is also, look, the elderly couple that can't get out of their Tenderloin apartment because they don't have mobility. It's the immigrant family that's working 3 jobs that just does not have the time to come down and yell at people. So as long as, and it's unfortunate that sometimes the loudest voices, kind of rule the day. But that does mean that the individual has got to stop stepping back and do have to get involved. Not just in yelling, but in canvassing and working for candidates that are going to do what they want to happen in the city, and support the mayor sometimes on stuff you might be mad about, but you kind of find out, well, geez, she doesn't have, the bureaucracy has taken away her ability to do anything about that. We've got to stand out for things like that. We actually have a very bureaucratic city, and I think that definitely is one of the problems. Like, who is responsible exactly for this, that, and the other thing?
It's another issue that maybe pervades everything, kind of the bureaucracy, or sort of the operational side of what happens in a city, because we've been a city that wants to protect different groups or individuals or causes. That creates regulation that then has to happen so that can be related to it. But what else, could we do to, streamline all of that would impact so many other issues? I mean, you see some of the stats about it takes 600 plus days to get housing development. We have a housing shortage, right? We need to get more people housed, and it takes, I guess, close to 2 years to get things that take other places a couple months through. What else, to do something at that level? It's not really a political issue. How do we think about doing that? Because it would make so many other things easier. And bureaucracy is the result of those good intentions with unintended consequences.
Yeah, I mean, so you're like 30,000 employees in the city. So like you have this massive, kind of team that should be working for the people of San Francisco. But then, you try building a house in San Francisco and see what that's like, right? It is shocking sometimes. I don't know what the answer is on that one. I don't know if I would even touch it by, criticizing it. It's notable during the pandemic. I don't think there was a single layoff of those 30,000 people. So there's something different happening in the way city staff works and how it works in just about any company that's in the city. It's just 2 different worlds. And I'm not sure you can ever change that. So it's frustrating, very, very difficult. I think we got to, before we get there, let's try to fix the problem between the mayor, board of soups, and then the courts, right? So, can the CEO of the city make key decisions on public safety, criminal justice reform, all the other things that have happen in the city? Right now, that's kind of really stuck. So how do you get the board of soups and the mayor working more closely together? Kind of like the way the DA and the mayor and the police are working much better today. And look, I love Chesa personally. I supported him, but it is working better today, right? So that helped. But then we do have to address the issue of a couple of nonprofits that are very powerful running the federal judges, even when the board and the mayor do agree, and blocking them. And, there's a stay right now from a federal judge, from one of the nonprofit groups that's blocking the mayor and the board from doing some of the work that they need to do to address some of the homeless encampments and the mental health issues and the drug abuse. And that's a problem.
And you talk about something that I often think about in regard to just the bureaucracy or just making progress, which is when you look at other cities that have tackled something really hard and been successful. Like I'm talking about homelessness in Houston, which made a lot of progress, or housing accessibility and affordability in San Diego, which made a lot of progress. Usually it's like there's an alignment that comes from elected officials, unelected officials, nonprofits, the community of we've got to tackle this problem. And most of the reason they're hard problems is that there's a lot of parts to it. And so we have to kind of come together to do it. And somehow that has to happen to tackle those things. And so sometimes I wonder, we can sit here, and I've had other guests on the podcast, and we'll go issue by issue, right? We'll do, okay, let's do homelessness, let's do housing, let's do crime safety, but they're all interrelated. It all impacts things. And, it makes it difficult if you don't have enough housing beds, because then you can't do some of the, because of the federal judge issue you mentioned, you can't, displace someone who's in probably an area they shouldn't be because you don't have someplace to go. And that's housing. And at the same time, fentanyl and drug abuse impacts homelessness to a huge extent right now, and all these things. So sometimes I wonder, do we need just a plan to, turn around San Francisco? That's not just issue by issue, here's how the legislation, that's all important. We just need a master plan to be aligned to tackle this hard stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that before, and it's totally true. I guess the problem is that plan then would have to be executable by either the mayor or a coalition of the mayor and the board, with the blessing of the nonprofits that sort of, it's a small city, but everybody's at each other's throats, right? So, the plan is kind of meaningless, and if each of the key leaders can't make that key decision.
You're looking to 2024 now. We've chatted about that a little bit, trying to make basically less, if you call it gridlock or infighting or just not seeing eye to eye. Really, you're targeting, it sounds like, between the mayor and the board of supervisors. Is that correct? I
think that has to be just a key objective for the people that care about the city and are rallying. And the good news is, and you probably know this, right? There's lots of groups out there that are rallying. Again, with the heart and soul of San Francisco. This is not like Trump people versus the progressives. We're mostly all progressives, right? Let's fix the stuff that we know is totally broken. But I think that does come mostly from 24. We got to check the police problem, but every single city in America has to do that. San Francisco, though, we have got to get more on the same page, board of soups and the mayor. That comes from 24. And then we have the lingering issue, and there's nothing out there that I see, is somehow we've got to deal with a couple of very powerful nonprofit groups that are optimizing under a single variable, whether it's privacy with EFF, which that seems to be all they care about, public safety be damned, or whether it's the ACLU local. Look, and I've supported ACLU National. I've written to them recently about how off the rails their local chapter has gone. But that's a problem. So what is our answer for that? The people that are concerned about San Francisco have got to stand up some kind of a counter force to kind of running to a judge and kind of blocking reasonable things. Because again, even if the board and the mayor started working together, you still got this, sort of lawsuit question that seems to be uniquely San Francisco. I mean, you don't see ACLU local going suing Walnut Creek, right? It's San Francisco. And a little bit of that's because that's where you get the attention. And that's probably where you're doing your fundraising. That's a unique problem that our city suffers from.
Are you hopeful for San Francisco? There's been a lot, particularly in regard to downtown revitalization or something like, a lot of people say it's never going to go back to how it was. I sometimes feel people are a little bit quick to either overestimate the highs and the lows as well. Like things are never quite as good as they seem and never quite as bad as they seem either. Do you find yourself being optimistic and hopeful as someone who's been, a unique vantage point, unblocking, unsticking things, and a lot of the players involved in all of this?
I mean, I'm 1,000% optimistic. I mean, this is the story of San Francisco, the boom bust, the rebirth. That's part of the creative process, right? So we're kind of setting up for something. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know it's going to be exciting as hell, right? And the flip side of every, kind of bust, the bust might be commercial real estate downtown. Okay, bad for real estate investors. That's good news for any new business that wants to start, or any new retail idea or entertainment idea or housing idea. It's just laying the field for all the creativity that exists here, which will just, it will just rush in, and you'll wake up one day and it'll be we'll be at the height of the boom again, right? So these things happen pretty quickly. It's a small city. It doesn't take much really to change the equation. And then throw in something like AI. We have to recognize the AI thing kind of overnight. It just exploded. It's all right here. The tens of billions that are going into that, not just on the development of it, but maybe on the safety rails of it. And think about all the derivatives that will come, of the second order derivatives from that. In a small city like San Francisco, place could be the most creative, busy place on the planet by next summer. It literally can go that way. So I just have no doubt in my mind on that. This is going to turn out another chapter.
And a lot of the raw ingredients that made San Francisco great didn't go away. This idea of this, because it's let's bring these ideas together, and you're judged on the merit of your idea or your cause or your passion or your commitment, not how you're dressed or how fancy you're dressed and, or, what car you drive. That is still here. This idea of that, anyone, two guys, two women, whoever it might be, which is some way that can disrupt big companies or entrenched ways of doing things, that you could do that, and you could do that here. And, you get a little bit romantic view of the garage, that's still here. You still have a lot of people that are really passionate and compassionate at the same time. That's still here. We have a lot of problems, but a lot of other big cities have those similar problems too. But somehow we've just, it has been not just the feeling of, for instance, like unsafety or crime, or the actual things, but it's the feeling of it, and the feeling that things are trending in the wrong direction. But it seems like it doesn't take a lot to get it going in the right direction. And the right direction doesn't mean you solve all your problems overnight, but it means it feels different. It feels like it's getting better, and that is contagious, and more people rally in. And instead of this sometimes doom loop, if you've seen the reporting on that, maybe it's a prosperity spiral where a good thing leads to a good thing leads to a good thing. Why does it always have to be bad leads to bad leads to bad?
Absolutely. And I guarantee you the doom loop, that was invented in Miami. Somebody who's over there, okay?
PR team in Miami, what do we call this thing over there? It's doom loop. Okay, that sounds bad. Yeah, they don't want that. Okay, good. Yeah, no. So, and then finally, what would you say, Chris, for others who want to get involved? What's your recommendation? They might not have millions of dollars to donate to something. Maybe some people do. We need those people too. But others, what is missing? If you were going to have impact and you were going to be okay, I got to work, I got a family, but I got 10 hours a week. how could someone make a difference on 10 hours or maybe 10 hours, or you got $1,000 or you have something else? What could they do with that would actually not just be lost in the shuffle?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think getting involved in 24, the 24 election, which is both March, by the way, and November, because in March, you're going to be picking, like party leaders, that sort of thing, which is actually quite important. So yeah, get involved, whether it's money, whether it's, making phone calls, whether it's talking to your neighbors. Remember, these supervisor races, they're won or lost by like sometimes 100, 200 votes. So one person just kind of, getting involved through calls or just talking to their neighbors, that makes a difference. So I think that's really important. Next time you see a police on the street, go thank them, thank her for their hard work. It's a hard job. And a little bit of appreciation goes a long way. I've seen it. They're not asking for much. And that can make a big difference as well. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done. If you're supporting ACLU, EFF, who do wonderful work, don't get me wrong, hold them accountable to some of the bad things they're doing, to some of the things they're doing that's hurting our city. Hold back on the contributions unless they can answer why. What are they doing to balance out privacy, criminal justice reform, and public safety? Because all of those things are important in a city, not just optimizing your one thing selfishly. Try to get on board being a good citizen. So I think that's going to be an emerging issue. I think that we're going to be hearing a lot more about.
And I'd love to see, for anyone listening too, that has a special skill, a special talent, use your special skill, right? If you're a graphic designer and you can do that, then you can use that in support of, let's drive some people to use those skills to join this cause or go to an event. If you're a developer, I was just interviewing the founder of Code for America, Jennifer Polka, and there's ways you can do that. So I also think, it's a rallying cry for right now, that now is not the time to sit back. And maybe final thought of the day is just that it's a unique opportunity for us now, because if there's enough will and we can rally enough people, and maybe there is a collective will now because people have seen what's happened and it doesn't have to be this way, then it's an opportunity for great change. So I think, you're right, not only being 2024 being election year, but also being just this moment where you don't have a lot of moments where you can like galvanize everyone to come together, and you gotta utilize that while you have it. And Chris, I'll give you the final word. Are we in that moment now? Is this a moment where we can make things happen?
Yeah, I think that's the exciting part. You're exactly right. This is a turning point. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but there's a lot of excitement to move the needle there. And I think we get back to a place like San Francisco could be the model for how the world of the future works. It absolutely could be that. And it could be that very soon.
According to Chris Larsen, San Francisco is special because of its sense of open-mindedness and acceptance of individuals. But that needs to be paired with a pragmatic approach to solving fixable problems that affect our quality of life. Chris says that misalignment between the mayor and the San Francisco Board of Supervisors makes it unnecessarily difficult for us to fix our most pressing problems. Just like the human body won't function well if, say, the heart is working against the liver, our city body politic won't function well if our executive branch and legislative branch can't stand each other. Chris points out that San Francisco operates in a competitive environment, that we're competing with other cities for everything from police officers to job-creating and tax-paying businesses. To thrive, we need elected leaders, community organizations, and voters who think about San Francisco's big picture, rather than just those who are entirely motivated by a single niche issue at the expense of everything else. All too often in San Francisco, good intentions have unintended consequences. But Chris says there's reasons to be hopeful. The raw ingredients of what makes San Francisco great hasn't changed, and the city's incredible creative energy can make progress happen quickly. What about that so-called downtown doom loop? Well, it might have been invented in Miami. So don't delay. You don't need millions of dollars to make a difference. We can organize, we can mobilize, we can individually and collectively turn around San Francisco's trajectory. I'm Ben Kaplan, and remember, we is always greater than me. We are San Francisco.
This amazing episode was brought to you by Top Thought Leader. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.